Hi, One Lit Teacher here. Today I'm going to talk about Shakespeare's Sonnet 130, My Mistress' Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun. This is a very famous poem in which the reader might at first glance think that Shakespeare is criticizing his lady, but actually he is not criticizing her. He is criticizing the sonnet tradition and sort of the cultural stereotypes that are still damaging to women today. This is a very standard English Shakespearean sonnet. It's a 14-line poem in iambic pentameter with the rhyme scheme AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. The theme, my mistress is nothing like this stereotypical Barbie doll woman that you keep holding up as the primary example of beauty, is established in quatrain 1. And then it further develops into quatrain 2. It softens in quatrain 3, and this is where if we had any doubt that he might be criticizing her, we see that he's not, where he says, I love to hear her speak. And then we realize by the volta, which occurs in the couplet at line 13, that the tone of sort of being critical or harsh or mocking is really not being addressed toward her at all, but towards this tradition in our culture that starts with Petrarchan poetry and Petrarch himself. So I have a few vocabulary words mentioned here that might help you if you're not familiar with these words. Dun is a color, a grayish brown color. Damasked is a variegated color or pattern that's not solid. So a rose, for example, could have this kind of pattern on it. Belied is to disguise, contradict, or fail to justify. So here I have some of those structural elements marked. Again, AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. And these are all pretty standard true rhymes. There's no need for I rhyme here. They all sound like they rhyme. Sun red, dun head, white cheeks, delight reeks, no sound, go, ground, rare, compare. And the iambic pentameter is also a very perfect example in this poem without the need for any kind of poetic license such as elision. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Dee-dum, 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 dee-dum. Coral is far more red than her lips red. And again, iambic pentameter is 10 syllables per line. It is 5 units of iambs, and each iamb is one unstressed and one stressed syllable. So in sonnets, we don't see stanzas with spacing in between. But if you're careful, you can see the units in the poem, 3 quatrains and a couplet, because of the rhyme scheme and also because of the end punctuation at the end of each quatrain, very neatly placed in this particular poem. Right here, I have pulled back some of the slides from my video on the sonnet tradition, which is also posted on One Lit Teacher. I wanted to just quickly remind you that these are the qualities of a Petrarchan lady that Petrarch and other sonneteers hold up as the perfect ideal in their poems, and Shakespeare is directly contrasting them here. His mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun, but the Petrarchan lady, well, her eyes are as bright as the stars and always compared to heavenly bodies. Shakespeare's mistress has lips that aren't really that red. In fact, coral is far more red than her lips are red. And the Petrarchan lady has lips that are as red as cherries or wine. Again, very predictable. Shakespeare's lady has breasts that are dun. In other words, her skin is brown. This poem is addressed to the dark lady after all. And the Petrarchan lady has ivory alabaster skin. Black wires grow on Shakespeare's lady's head, whereas we know that Petrarch's Laura and the Petrarchan lady has silky blonde hair. Okay, Shakespeare's lady has cheeks that really aren't very rosy or red, and the Petrarchan lady has rosy cheeks or cheeks like peaches. Shakespeare's lady has breath that reeks. Whereas the only thing kind of dangerous or uncomfortable about the Petrarchan lady is that sort of very melodramatically her sighs could threaten the life of the Petrarchan lover. Music hath a far more pleasing sound than Shakespeare's lady's voice, but we all know that the Petrarchan lady has a voice like an angel or a songbird. We could almost complete those lines, and they are still in love songs, pop love songs today. Some of these Petrarchan lady ideas. And again, I would argue that the Disney princess, the Barbie doll, they are all the Petrarchan lady. And sometimes we try to interrupt that idea in our culture because we're beginning to realize that it's damaging to women. So Disney has brought in princesses who are not the Petrarchan lady, but really only in very recent years. And, Barbie suddenly is not allowed to say, math is hard anymore. And Dove has created the Campaign for Real Beauty. But Shakespeare was talking about these things over 400 years ago in this sonnet, and I'll argue in some other pieces of literature as well. So Shakespeare begins the poem with a kind of a simile, and I'm saying it's a kind of a simile because it's not a perfect simile. He is saying, my mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun, and kind of extends that pseudo-simile idea, but she's not really like all these things going on into the rest of quatrain 1 and into quatrain 2. So there's a lot of imagery in the poem that is anti-Petrarchan or against those Petrarchan ideals, and those are the ideas that I just mentioned. So her lips are not red, her skin is not white, her hair is black, and her cheeks are not rosy, and so on. So that also brings in this color motif: coral red, white, dun, black. And in this sonnet, it is very clear that Shakespeare is asserting the beauty of his lady by sort of going in a reverse psychology kind of strategy, and he is mocking the Petrarchan sonnet tradition here. The bard uses imagery to build a contrast between what is myth and reality, because the Petrarchan lady is an ideal. She is this lady held up on a pedestal. You cannot love her. She may not even be a real person after all. So Shakespeare uses some celestial imagery to point her out. Okay, he says, I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. And he swears by heaven in the final couplet. There's some very strong sensory imagery in this poem, and I think that's because Shakespeare is saying, but she is this down-to-earth, real woman. You can see her, you can smell her, you can touch her and hear her, and so on. And so the imagery appeals to those senses. Again, her hair being dark, her cheeks not being rosy, her breath doesn't smell like perfume, it reeks. Her voice doesn't sound like music, but she walks on the ground. She has a down-to-earth, real-world kind of feel about her, which is what we want in a love, someone we can actually relate to and someone we can actually love. And so some of the nature imagery also goes along with that real world, or real life, I should say, down-to-earth quality of the lady. So Shakespeare uses the rhyming couplet at the end to clarify exactly how he feels about this woman. And yet, by heaven, I think my love is rare as any she belied with false compare. And leading up to that, there, if you go back and look, okay, this was an argument. Words like if, no such, yet well I know, and yet, and then in the final line, belied and false. They really help us to see this as an argument which Shakespeare wins by the end of the poem. There's a little bit of sound devices, repetition, red, roses, again, kind of just reinforce the imagery and the idea that his woman, the picture that he paints of her, is not this stereotypical woman. Alliteration is sort of subtle in this poem. I'm going to say in quatrain 3, it's most important where we get this sort of grounded, down-to-earth idea. The G alliteration kind of slows us to get the real strong sense of it there. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. So this sonnet, again, identifies the danger of idealizing one type of beauty. Shakespeare's Sonnet 130 revels in Shakespeare's love for a down-to-earth woman and mocks the tradition of deifying an unrealistic stereotype. I think this is a great example of a poem that seeks to raise up real women and say we are all flawed human beings, and that's really what makes us beautiful. And holding up some kind of stereotypical Barbie doll ideal as the perfect woman is really dangerous, not only for women, but also for our entire culture. If you enjoyed this video, please go to One Lit Teacher and subscribe to see more videos about Shakespeare's sonnets, about poetry in general, and about other great writers' works.